The Brewhouse was created to capture and share with you the long history of the Genesee Brewery. But the brewery itself isn't half as interesting as the beer and the people who make it. Visit GeneseeBrewhouse.com. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. This is the Rochester Press Box presented by the Genesee Brewhouse, and a pleasure to welcome back Bill Scharr onto our panel. Bill, you're a rep guy. Tell us what it is actually that you do.
Yeah, I have a rep agency, so we're an outsourced sales force for about 10 companies.
Bill, you're, of course, one of the, what did you say, probably the two best high school quarterbacks in this area, and we never asked you point blank, are you better than Jake Zembeck? Were you better?
I'm going to bet he did better on his SATs than I did. So,
that's a very political way to say it.
Yes, exactly. I got to meet Jake. Danny Fichter, a friend of mine, runs a bigger, faster, stronger organization over in Pittsford, and got to meet Jake and his dad. Super nice kid, and it remains to be seen where he's going to end up. With the success that Penn State's having.
He's in a tough spot.
It gets harder and harder, right? As a matter of fact, I was talking to a friend last week that I wouldn't be shocked if he had the opportunity to transfer, assuming he's healthy. I could see that as a possibility.
Cool. Mike Catalana, co-hosting along with Pat Duffy. Who are you wearing today?
Quarterbacks post-Kelly, Kyle Orton this morning. By the way, I could be wrong, but I'm almost positive Kyle Orton, the highest winning percentage for a quarterback post-Kelly in this Bills era. It's either him or Flutie, but I think it's Orton.
Quite an eventful week for your game of football, in the NFL especially. Sorted out.
Yeah, politically, there's a lot going on, and it's rare that you see the politics and sports, intersect the way they do. I thought, Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys, I thought, handled that issue probably the best in that they acknowledged the unity, but it was prior to, the national anthem. And, I think they did a good job of just saying, hey, we're together in this issue, but we're not going to, step on the toes of, politicizing it further with not, standing for the national anthem.
So that looks staged and contrived. I didn't like it at all. The Jerry Jones thing.
Yeah, well, because Jerry Jones had come out and said he would cut anybody who protested.
That's a false quote, right? That wasn't actually attributed to Jerry Jones. It was just one of those Facebook memes. I'm just letting you know, not to make you look stupid.
Jerry Jones has been very outspoken about not wanting his players to protest, so he was in a spot when that ended up happening. But at the same time, now when you take a step back, literally a step back from where you would be and to do it before the anthem, that's not the same protest, right? That's how this got all the attention in the first place, because it was tied to the anthem. And the argument, I'm just saying, is the argument being made it's not the right place to do it. Well, it depends on what your goal is, because if your goal is to disrupt, then the anthem is the place to do it, because obviously that's what caused the biggest issue.
Sure, and I mean, it's funny, people say, to your point, it was the best option. And yes, I guess after all that, it was the case. But to your point, if everybody had started kneeling before the anthem, there would have been none attention, there would have been no disruption, there would have been nobody talking about it. I mean, I was at that Bills game, you were too, Mike. I'm sitting in the crowd watching this thing, and the weirdest part, and I told the story on the air in the break room, the players start to take a knee, and the crowd starts to boo, and the national anthem starts. So these folks are upset with the demonstration for the national anthem, which I understand, but they're also booing during the national anthem, and they're booing the players, but you're also booing the song, and they're upset with the players for disrespecting the anthem, but you are also disrespecting the anthem while the song's playing. And I look up, and where my seats are, Bob Kalsu, who I believe was the only active NFL player to die in Vietnam.
Yes.
His name is on the wall there, and I couldn't help but think, if we could talk to Bob Kalsu right now, with everything that's going on, what would he say? Because the argument is you're disrespecting veterans. Well, no, we've had veterans come out and say, I'm not offended by this thing. What would that man who has been in that position on the field, who died serving his country in a war that wasn't the most popular, what would he say at that moment about what was happening?
I've gotten a lot of emails, and from vets in many cases, talking about the issue to them. And I guess I say the same thing. If you can't, as a protester, understand why it bothers a vet, a policeman, someone maybe a little generational. I think the flag in a certain way, we grew up maybe a little bit differently than in the place of reverence. Not that it shouldn't have it for all Americans, but in that place. If you don't understand that, then I think you're at fault for not seeing why it would bother them. In the same way, if you are that person who feels that way and you can't open your eyes to see why somebody else may look at that, whether it's not specifically the flag, but circumstances in the country differently, it's going to be hard to come together. And I kind of made the analogy. It's like being in your home and trying to understand what your teenager is thinking. You're in the home. Your goals are all the same. You love your family, but you don't think like your teenager, and your teenager does not think like you. And until you put yourself in that spot, I don't think in either case you're really going to ever understand what the other person wants.
This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. We'll talk about the Buffalo Bills next. Welcome back to the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Let's talk Buffalo Bills. And the guy who got it picked right, picked the Bills outright, and is 5-1 against the spread, making picks this year so far.
Could you repeat that again? Yeah. Did you hear?
You're a game up with 14 weeks to go.
Not
That's
even
why
that
he's
part.
enjoying it now.
It's picking the Broncos. Look, and I will say this: a lot of times we all, you're sort of guessing on almost any game because we saw the way the games went. It was more about the circumstances in the game. And I say to you all the time, it's not who you play. Sometimes it's when you play them.
The three of us didn't listen.
Well, but that being said, we saw the same thing with Oakland coming east, playing against Washington. And they were abysmal in that game. So you would think that teams might come back. Look, this is a tougher spot for the Bills. And winning that game does open up some eyes. If you're Atlanta, you're 3-0, but you have struggled in games. I mean, obviously they were inches away from losing this last game. And the Bills beating Denver makes it easier for Quinn and that staff to look at the Bills and say, hey, we got to take these guys more seriously. They just beat the Broncos, who everybody would say is a playoff team, or they've been a playoff team. I think it's a tough spot to go down there on the road and play that team. And this is the first legitimate top-notch offense that the Bills have faced. I mean, let's see, how much better are you going to be than the Falcons? The Patriots on occasion, the Raiders when they're good and all, but Atlanta is that team still. All that being said, I think the Bills still stay in this football game the whole way through. I think their defense is good enough. I think McCoy will come back a little bit this week. But I've got Atlanta to win at 24-19.
All right. 7 is the line. Who's that?
I mean, I think the Bills cover. I'm buying into this defense, not just because they performed so well, but the way they did it last week, where in the first half they did not look good. Trey White was getting just eaten up all game long, and they were picking on him over and over and over again. And something that we saw on Sunday that we haven't seen in years in Buffalo, halftime adjustments. Yeah. They came out and the defense looked absolutely phenomenal. And Tre'Davious White comes up with a game-saving interception. The Bills are going to cover. Screw it. They're going to win outright. I think the Bills beat Atlanta in Atlanta, but they're definitely covering on Sunday.
Back to being Duffy, because he picked against him last week the first time in 2 years.
Kyle Orton jersey makes me strong.
Billy, who you got?
If they still had Kyle Orton, I would say Buffalo would win this game. But, I don't see it happening. I think Atlanta is just getting the engine revved up. I think their defense is great. That's going to carry them. I think when they go through the season, I was looking at their schedule earlier that, can they get to 10 wins? I think so. I mean, I was looking at who they could, based on people's schedules today, including 2 losses to the Patriots and a split with the Dolphins, they could get to 10 wins. But Atlanta was not one of the ones I had on that vision.
Wins.
I mean, obviously they got to stay healthy, and a lot of things have to go their way. But as far as Atlanta, I think down there, I think it's going to be tough. I was surprised actually. Tyrod did a really good job this week. They scored some points, but I think if they're going to have some 12-7 wins somewhere down the line, because I just think they're going to struggle to score points.
As a quarterback, just give me a quick synopsis of what you see as Tyrod Taylor's.
I like him a lot. His skill set's good. I think that, he can't run the ball as much because he's got to stay healthy, and that's a threat. You can still be a threat without having to carry the ball 15 or 20 times a game.
Okay, against the points, you're going with who now? Atlanta, Buffalo, 7?
I'm taking Atlanta.
Okay, pick a second game for us.
I'm going to say the New England game. New England is hosting Carolina. I think Tom Brady's got that thing kind of running again, and I think Cam Newton's still looking for the keys to his engine. And I think at home they're tough to beat, and it's just the beat goes on up in New England.
Who's your second game, Mr. 5-1?
I'm going to take. It's not a particularly good team, but I'm going to take San Francisco getting 7 points from Arizona. I watched Arizona, and Larry Fitzgerald was just fantastic. Like he's 25 years old again. He was great. That's not a great football team. It is not a great team. I think that game might have taken a little bit out of them. San Francisco hangs in there defensively. If you look at the numbers behind their games, they're not good. But I think they'll stay in the game. I'll take the points.
Okay.
With that pick, it's good to know I'm going to get my game back that I need from Mike next week. I'm going Tennessee, Houston. Houston is a 2-point dog. Never take Mike Mularkey in a divisional game. Houston, not only
law, right? It's law.
I don't think Tennessee's that good, and I think Houston with Deshaun Watson kicking in a high gear right now. Houston not only covers but wins outright against Tennessee on Sunday.
All right, I like Atlanta. I like Oakland getting 2 points at Denver. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Like it or not is next. Hello, everyone. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Like it or not, Pat Duffy. We've got Rick Pitino being fired essentially by the FBI.
This is awesome, and it's fine. And I'm glad it's so high profile. Not that it wouldn't be if he wasn't fired, but people want to make the argument all the time that there's no problem with paying college athletes because of all the money the coaches and the universities make. But that's the biggest problem, is Rick Pitino has been able to build this wealth, personal wealth, tens of millions of dollars every year to coach these amateur kids. Meanwhile, the story you don't see are the kids that think they're going to be NBA first-round draft picks, because every kid that goes to Louisville or Kentucky or Memphis or Syracuse thinks they're going to be a first-round pick. Very rarely does that work out. In the wake of the payments of $50,000 to these 17-year-old kids are broken down, uneducated kids who were given everything up front and then left to die by Pitino and Calipari and Tarkanian and name all these other guys. I'm glad he's publicly pantsed, and that's the issue with this. It's not the kids that make it and defend their coaches. It's the guy who is now working at a gas station who was supposed to be a first-round pick, who never got an education and a $50,000 check.
Billy, in the long run, does this do any good?
You know what? Here's what I think one of the issues is. Until the NCAA, which is one of the most hypocritical organizations that we have, acknowledges and accepts the fact that this is a business and there's a lot of money being thrown around. And as long as they're going to allow coaches like Pitino to make $5, $6, $7 million a year, and the athletes that are putting people in the seats to get nothing, it's a broken system. So I think it's the tip of the iceberg in terms of acknowledgement of that. But I mean, it's not new, but it's, you know, between Twitter and Facebook, everything that's out there right now, Big Brother's always watching. So I think it's become more understood that this is going on. Obviously, there's facts right here now, but I think the NCAA has to address it and have a meeting with themselves and look at themselves in the mirror and say, hey, this is a business. We're not going to say education, and then at the same time, you know, count the money in the money room. It can't go on like that.
Mike, quickly, like it or not, the NBA saw two pretty big stars move this week.
Yeah, I think for Carmelo Anthony, it's a good thing for him, and it's a very good thing for the Knicks. If the Knicks are ever going to move on, they needed to get Carmelo out. It's not all his fault. Phil Jackson had a big part in what's been a mess there. And let's see how he can make it work out. If he were to adjust his game and realize who he is now, I think he could have some success with Oklahoma City. Let's see if he does that. And Dwayne Wade, we all knew this was eventually going to happen. He sort of ended up playing the Chicago Bulls. They paid him to go away. Now he's with LeBron. I think, again, in that role, he could really help LeBron in a more limited role. But I think they're both good for the NBA. I really do.
Which of the two is more significant?
Probably Wade. Because if I look at it this way, Cleveland needs everything they've got in order to compete. I don't think Carmelo... Oklahoma City is an interesting team, but they still need some other parts because their level to go against is still Golden State, even to get out of the West. So I'll say Wade for right now because that's what LeBron needs. He needs those extra pieces.
This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Unfinished Business is next.
Dunkin' has lots of fall favorites to root for. Maple pecan, pumpkin, maple sugar bacon. But on game day, we root for one team. One team, baby. Win the fall, folks.
Welcome back to the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. In this portion, Unfinished Business, brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts. America runs on Dunkin'. Pat.
Our good buddy, Toby Matika, co-worker of Mike Catalana, caught something by accident earlier this week. He was at the opening of Amerks training camp and walking around at the Blue Cross Arena, former Sabres captain Brian Giunta. And he's having discussions with the general manager of the Amerks. They asked the GM about it, and he said something along the lines of just potential discussions about Brian and his future. The rumors are swirling that Giunta is going to come home and play for the Rochester Americans. And it makes perfect sense. He wants to play for Team USA. He can't do that while playing in the NHL. He's very into family, so this would keep his family home, and it keeps him in shape to go win a gold medal, maybe as the captain of Team USA. This needs to happen. It would be the greatest hometown Rochester sports story of all time. The golden boy, done good, comes home to play, and it would pack the barn of a place that desperately needs people in the seats to show the city of Rochester how valuable this hockey team is to the community. So I will ask you this. Brian's a guy who's out all the time. There are folks watching right now who know Brian personally. Call him, write him, Facebook him. You can tweet at him at GeoStyle21 and tell him what it would mean to you to watch him put on that Amerks crest and skate around the Blue Cross Arena. Because I'm telling you, if you have kids and they're into sports, it will be one of the greatest memories this season Brian Giunta playing they'll ever have.
This is like old school. When a guy at his level comes back and plays in the American Hockey League, if he did. And I'm with Pat 1,000%. He needs it because he does really want to play for the Olympic team, needs a place to play, and the Amerks could use it. And that Amerks team could be really good. And with Giunta on the ice, they could be an exceptional team.
You got me all excited about
Let's
it.
do it!
Billy, what do you got?
Well, I love college football. I love college basketball. I like college sports in general. And with the recent FBI findings, I think it's the tip of the iceberg. I think we're going to see more of this happen. And until the NCAA, as I said earlier, addresses the fact that this is a business, okay, and there's a lot of money being thrown around. They either need to sequester where the money goes and how it flows, or this is going to continue happening. There's just too much money available, and it's too easy for these kids to take it.
It was such a well-kept secret when it came out on Tuesday, and it's like, and I wonder how many people out there that weren't actually named are there. Oh my God! I'm just glad that I didn't show up on that indictment. You know?
Yeah, it's. I think there's a lot of that going on right now, and there's just a lot of money being thrown around, and it has to be run like either a business or it has to be considered higher education.
Can't have it both ways.
Yeah, well, I think there is a way to. I'm going to pick up on what Billy said. The NCAA is not equipped to run things as a business. I think what they need to do is run certain sports if they want. Go ahead, boys soccer, girls field hockey, run those kind of sports. Keep them that really are, let's be honest, much more truer amateur status. Stay out of men's basketball and stay out of big-time college football. You can't run it. You're not good enough. Those conferences, those leagues need to run themselves. They basically need a commissioner, make college football, big-time college football, an entity of its own, do the same thing with big-time college basketball. The NCAA, it doesn't work. And their phoniness and their hypocritical status on most things is almost kind of comical. And in the end, when guys like Rick Pitino get fired, I think it's good for college basketball because he's been a phony all along. He's had many other circumstances where he's put a blind eye to everything. And maybe they got him on something that he might have not even had as much to do with, but it's about time. The NCAA is phony and hypocritical. They can't run big-time athletics. Go back to the smaller sports where you can be effective.
You know what's a shame is you can't just hire the FBI. You know, it's the NCAA
Well,
put the FBI on a retainer.
Anybody else shocked by the fact with everything going on in the world that the biggest FBI story of the week was college basketball? Isn't it like Russia, like North Korea, and Puerto Rico?
Yeah, it pushed the football protests off the front page. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse Unfinished Business, brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts. Billy, thank you very much. Great having you
Thank
back.
you guys, appreciate
Mike,
it.
Pat, thank you.
At GeoStyle21, do it, Brian, for God's sakes.
Do it. See you next week.